Again, thank you all for being here. This is our first gathering of what we're calling Forest Talk, where we talk story about the animals, the plants, and all the cool things that we find in our native Ohia forests. We're super excited today to welcome Norine Yeung as our first guest. Nori will share about Hawaiian land snails, known as the world's most threatened animal group. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kim Rogers, and I'm outreach specialist at Kauai Invasive Species Committee. We are a project of the Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit at the University of Hawaii. My main focus at KISC is on ohia and our native forest ecosystems, saving them from rapid ohia death and other forest invaders. Before we turn things over to Nori, though, I do have a couple of requests and announcements. First, please drop in the chat, if you will, where you're joining us from today, and if you're affiliated with an organization. That is always fun for us to see and helpful too, to know who we are talking with. And also, Zoom etiquette, if you would, make sure you're muted so we don't get any weird background noises and sounds. Um, we are recording this because we have a few people who were not able to make it today. So we'll get that edited down and uploaded and shared with everybody by the end of the week, if not sooner. Um, Also, I wanted to share that next week, Wednesday, March 12th, I'll be hosting a group of forest journalers in Kokee. Forest journaling, as many of you have probably heard me talk about, is also known as nature journaling, but as the name implies, our nature journaling happens in the forests. These workshops are geared for non-scientists, non-artists, and/or non-writers. There's absolutely no experience necessary. The only things necessary are paper and a pencil, and most importantly, a curious mind. We'll welcome wonder, soak in a little science, make some marks and or notes on paper. Most of all, we slow down and connect with the forest for a few hours. Our destination next week, Wednesday, will be Kaluapuhi Trail in Kokee, where twice before I have seen a couple different species of Hawaiian land snails. But take note, they were super tiny. I like to compare their size to the size of a single flake of black pepper. So a
Oh,
hand lens was super helpful to see and or photographing them and zooming in. But Nori will be telling us a lot more about that. I'm going to put in the chat the link to register for next week's forest journaling workshop, but no promises on the snail slidings, though, I will have to admit. Um, and then our next forest talk, so our next event like today, will be held via Zoom, and it will be the first week of May. And it will be with Kauai Forest Bird Recovery Project, and they will be giving us an update on the state of our forest birds. And many of you so kindly gave information when you registered for today's talk on other topics that you'd like to hear from us. So I've got those in the pipeline. I'm trying to reach out to experts to talk on things like other terrestrial invertebrates, native plants in the forest, non-vascular plants in the forest, bogs and marsh invertebrates, and of course, an update on ohia and rod. And you guys gave me a whole list of some other great ideas that I hope to get scheduled for us this year sometime. But that for now, I think, is it. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat at any time, and hopefully we'll get to those. And let me just double check the chat right now to see if there's any burning questions that I need to address right now or technical issues. Looks like we're good. So, Nori, are you ready? Shall I introduce you?
yep.
Okay,
Let's get started.
let's do it. Um, Still admitting people. I love it. People are still coming in. So, as a malacologist focusing on Pacific Island land snails, the world's most threatened animal group, Nori has been a part of a team of researchers that have been instrumental in advancing our understanding of Hawaiian land snails. The work she has helped lead has resulted in the rediscovery of more than 200 species of Hawaiian land snails once thought to be extinct. Nori uses an integrative approach combining historical collections from museums, genetics, and morphological analyses, and fieldwork aimed at discovery, documentation, and conservation of biodiversity in Hawaii. As a science educator, she engages students, teachers, community scientists in hands-on, field-based study and outreach to bridge the gap between research and applied management. And with that, I'm going to go on mute and turn things over to Dr. Norine Yeung from Bishop Museum. Thanks for being here, Nori.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation, Kim. I hope the Wi-Fi is good. There seems to be some Wi-Fi issues at Bishop Museum today, and if I lag or start freezing in a very awkward face, just don't do any screenshots and send it to me, please. And I hope we'll go through smoothly here. All right. But anyways, but again, thank you, Kim, so much for introduction. Today I'm going to be talking more of the native side of the land snails in Hawaii. I have a whole different slide if it comes to invasive snails. So if you guys are more interested about snails after this talk, I would love to come back to talk to more about the actual bad snails in Hawaii. All right. But anyways, let's get started. All right. So you guys, a lot of people in Hawaii actually see all of these headlines every single day. It's not a new idea or new news headline that we are at the risk of extinction. So many things in Hawaii around the world are going extinct faster than we can even save them a lot of the times, right? And a lot of these extinctions are actually happening in biodiversity hotspots. All right, so this is a question for you guys. You can put in the chat or you guys can say it verbally. What is a definition or what are the characteristics of a biodiversity hotspot? Anybody? Well, I'm only on slide 2. This is going to be a very long talk. If no one answers. Anybody wants to just guess what that a biodiversity hotspot means?
And if it's easier just to unmute yourself rather than type some big long paragraph, feel free to do that. I know we have a lot of scientists here, so they should be able to answer this question.
Am I not seeing it on chat?
I'm no scientist, but I'm guessing that it's like a concentrated area where there are many species of a certain thing.
Thank you.
Thank you for so this so a hotspot is an area with a lot of different species, right? Like a high biodiversity, but it also has a high number of endemic species. So species only found in those places. Additionally, so you have a lot of species, a lot of endemic species, but also high levels of species extinctions. So there are about 36 areas right now around the world that are designated as biodiversity hotspots, 6 of which completely reside in the Pacific Ocean. So you have one in Japan, the Philippines, New Zealand, New Caledonia, as well as Polynesia, Micronesia, and the East Melanesia hotspot. And we live right in the middle of one of those hotspots. So the islands within these hotspots in the Pacific combined, there are more than 6,000 islands. That's like about 2% of the area of the continental US. There are 14 countries, as well as 3 US territories, which include the Marianas, Guam, American Samoa, and then, of course, the state of Hawaii. And the US Pacific Islands make up about 18,000 square meters of land area, and are home to about 600 threatened and endangered species protected under the ESA. Hawaii has more than 500 species, and so we have the unfortunate title of the endangered species and extinction capital of the world. So in comparison, we're such a small little island compared to the continental US that has about 1,000 species. So what are some of the threats to biodiversity? Anybody?
Invasive species?
Invasive species, yes, impact of invasive species. What else?
Pollution.
Pollution, yeah. So a lot of the threats to biodiversity, unfortunately, are human mediated, right? So we have habitat pollution, fragmentation, we have species over exploitations, climate change, and of course, all the diseases that are associated with all of these threats, right? So this is not a huge news. But what I usually add are knowledge shortfalls. Okay, these are things that we don't even know about, that we have no clue much of the information to be able to be solving invasive species impacts or habitat destruction. Because sometimes things come in here and we have no clue what it is until it has incredible impacts into our ecosystem. And so here are a couple of publications that have categorized some of these knowledge shortfalls that we need for conservation, right? And so at the top of the list, I put the Linnaean, which is the species taxonomy. There's a lot of things that we don't know about. We don't know what they are. We don't know the distribution. We don't know how many there are. We don't know how they're related to each other, and so forth. So these are the main knowledge gaps that we really need to fill if we are to have effective conservation. Conservation, and many times, has a lot of areas that needs to be filled with this knowledge, right? It's an interface of evolution and ecology and systematics. And each component is needed for effective conservation. So to manage populations and to conserve species, you need accurate taxonomy. And then you need to have identification of the genetic relationships. You have to understand their distribution, how the populations are connected. And then finally, what are the habitat requirements to be saving a lot of these species? And of course, unfortunately, you need to start at systematics, because unless you know what they are, you can't be comparing their evolution. You can't be comparing their habitat relationships. You don't even know what it is to be able to figure out what is needed to be saving a lot of these plants and animals. And when it comes to animals, there is almost 2 million species that we know of, right? And of the 2 million or the 1.5 million, most of the species that we know of on Earth are primarily arthropods. And so the closest group that we know about are the mollusks, that makes about 6% of the animals that we have described. And then you have the chordates, which is like the vertebrates. But then you have all of these things to the right side, all of these invertebrate phyla that we hardly know anything about, right? And so a lot of these things are the things that make the world go round, right? Including the arthropods. So if the bees go extinct, we're basically going to be starving in 3 months because we need these pollinators, right? And the truth is, from E.O. Wilson, we need invertebrates, but they don't need us, right? So if the human beings were to disappear tomorrow, the world will go on with little change. But if the invertebrates disappear, we are going to be in big trouble. And a lot of the things that we need to know about to make the world go round, to make us all healthy and to be able to survive on this earth, we know so little about, particularly the nematodes. And when people think about nematodes, they're like, oh, that's all bad. We need to kill them all. But that's the same thing with bacteria, right? There's good bacteria and then there's bad bacteria. And so we need to figure out what they are so that we can figure out how to keep our ecosystems healthy along with us. So I'm going to shift gears to the mollusks. So this is a fun group to be working on. Again, this is the second largest animal phylum. There's about 100,000 to 200,000 species. You can find animals in this group in pretty much all the continents, in all the oceans, and in pretty much every single habitat, from the deep sea thermal vents to high up in the mountains. So you can even have native snails on Mauna Kea, right below the edge of the snow line. And so besides snails, what other animals belong to this mollusk group? Anybody? Anybody want to guess?
Clams?
Clams, yes. Anything else? Well, throw me another animal. Anything? Nothing?
What about like pipipi and kupe'e type things?
They're snails, right? So they're
Oh,
also
okay.
that good. All
Okay.
right, so won't make this too painful for you guys. Probably need a nap after lunch. But okay, speaking of lunch, I like to eat. So taco poke, all right, grilled ika, so squid, cuttlefish, octopus, kona abalone, opihi, clams, and mussels in lots of bacon and cream sauce. So all of these animals belong to the mollusk group. You also have this cool blue sea dragon, the nautilus. You have the sea bunny and this really fat octopus. So all of these are not photoshopped. This is what they look like. So this is the amazing array of animals that are in this mollusk group. However, from this study, all mollusks outnumber the number of any recorded animal extinctions combined, more than birds, more than any reptiles, more than any mammals. Most of these extinctions are happening in terrestrial ecosystems. And on terrestrial ecosystems, most of these extinctions are unfortunately on Pacific Islands. So I kind of told you some cool stuff about mollusks, but should we even be conserving mollusks? Why is that important? Why do you think it's important that we should be spending my? Why is it important that I would spend my career studying snails? Or tell me if it isn't, which is fine too, because I still get a chance to do something else. Anybody? Why should we even conserve them?
Because they provide food for larger species.
Yes, they provide food. Yes. Anything else that you guys know about snails or mollusks?
Do they eat like bacterias and things?
Well, a lot of them are detritivores, so they eat up all of the animal waste and plant waste. So yes, so there are several ecosystem services that mollusks provide for us. So the huli is a native a forest bird of Maui that unfortunately is now extinct. Was known to eat snails. You have this endemic carnivorous caterpillar from Hawaii that eats snails, and of course you have rats that are invasive species that eat our snails. And unfortunately, this is I don't know if you can see this video. It is a invasive snail that was brought to Hawaii as biocontrol. And instead of eating the giant African snail, which it was supposed to control, it ate up all of our native snails like this. So it basically rips the body from the shell. That's how it eats and then swallows it. But other ecosystem services, so they are litter decomposition and nutrient recyclers. So we don't have native earthworms. We don't have a lot of those nutrient cyclers. So our snails actually provided that role in our Hawaiian ecosystems. A lot of these snails also are not able to fly away or run away like a lot of other animals. So once they start to come to an area, right, they can't really move. So if you see a stream or a coral reef or a forest with a lot of snails and a high diversity of them, they have been correlated with a healthy ecosystem. But once they start dying off, you should probably pay attention because they're like a canary in a coal mine, because they're not able to move and run away from a lot of these threats. Some of the other things in the aquatic system, they help to filter all the sediments out from our waters so that it keeps it clear and clean. And some of these shells also in the marine system are huge. So you have other things that start to colonize on top of the shell. So it's like an island, a little moving island in the ocean. And then culturally, it's really important to us as humans throughout society and over the centuries. A lot of people, no matter where you are, have gone to the beach, picked up a shell, and took it home as a souvenir, right? Lately now, they've been using the slime for a lot of medical things, whether it's a spa, right, where they can put slime on your face and it's supposed to moisturize it and make it smooth. I have not tried that yet, and I'm not really going to try that. But they're also trying to figure out the properties from the snail slime, because they're so sticky that there are some people that are allergic to the synthetic bandages when you have heart surgeries and stuff. So they're trying to find out organic bandage for a lot of these surgeries. And these this mussel here has these byssal threads that are super, super strong with like really beautiful golden colors. And people have farmed these threads to actually make gloves. And in Pacific Islands, mollusks had a much more of a positive perception than a lot of Westerners. Because a lot of people are like, oh, gross, kill all the snails, they eat up all of my lettuce in the gardens, right? But Pacific Islanders, whether you're from Fiji or Samoa or from Hawaii, had more of a positive attitude towards mollusks. They were used as trade for money. They were used as jewelry. You can use a kauri to catch another mollusk, octopus. So they put a he'e, leho on a he'e lure to capture a octopus. And these are all of the wonderful names in the Hawaiian dictionary of land snails that people don't even realize right? You have ka huli, pupu kanioe, pupu kolea uka, hini hini ula. All of these names are representative of land snails in Hawaii. And so here are again all these islands, the Pacific Islands. They're about 6,000.
Hey,
And
Nori, real
yes.
quick before you move on to this
Mhm.
topic, there was a question. Do the snails aerate and loosen soil?
No, so the snails are usually right at the top soil, so they do not burrow underneath, like earthworms do. And so I have another talk for invasive earthworms around here, but there's a correlation that wherever earthworms are in our native forests, um, there is a increase of invasive plants that can come into the area. So earthworms are supposedly changing the structure of our native ecosystem forest that allows more plants, more invasive plants to become colonizing. So we need a lot more information and research of what actual impacts of earthworms are, but there are some correlations. Also, pigs root up areas wherever there are earthworms also because that's a food source, right? So yeah, so they aren't, again, they don't aerate, but they break down and munch up all of the poop as well as plant waste. And like my third graders say, they poop out fertilizer packets because that's what they do. And it goes back all into the ground again for the plants to uptake to grow these very healthy forests. Yeah. So so there are about 1,200 land snail species in North America, north of Mexico. How many land snail species are in Hawaii? Any guesses at all? Come on, this is like the Price is Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
you
about
can't go wrong here.
1,200
Put a
in
number in the
the US
chat, somebody.
continent. How many do you think we have in Hawaii in comparison? No guests?
Oh, wait. We
50?
we
Okay,
have
a little bit more than that. Okay, a
oh,
little a
we
little
have
bit
all
more than that.
kinds. Yeah.
Yes.
3,850, 550.
All right. So we
Thank
have 759 species of Hawaiian land snails. 99.9% are endemic. So which means 756 are only found on these islands, nowhere else in the world. So once they go extinct, there's nowhere else in the world that can seed these islands. And so that's why when I say there's a Hawaiian land snail, these are truly Hawaiian land snails because there's nowhere else in the world that has these snails. And so this here is the Sanabatafran Tree of Life. This has about 100 or so land snail families, and this group encapsulates most of the land snails that we have throughout the world. So in Hawaii, we have 13 families. And as you can see, they span this entire tree of life of land snails across the world. So it wasn't only one or two small colonizers from us, like one or two families that are extremely related to each other. There are disparate. They're like every possible place on this tree of life of land snails. We had a representative come to Hawaii, colonize, and from about 21 colonization events, we have 759 described species. And our land snail species can be found, and the reason why I say land snails and not tree snails, because tree snails is a misconception, right? Our snails are everywhere from the rocky rubble on the land to the highest parts of the ohia and everything in between. There's also several ways that they can make babies. Some of them are male and female, but the majority of them are hermaphroditic. So they just need another individual to be able to mate and make more babies. And that also helped with colonizing really isolated islands across the Pacific. And of course, there are two ways that they can also make babies. Some of them lay eggs outside of their body, and others, the keiki hatch within the shell and then they pop out. So it looks like they're having live birth, but they're technically not. And then they also have a lot of shell shapes, from the conical shells to the what I call the cinnamon bun shells, because they're all very beautifully spiraled. And none of our native snails eat live plants or live seedlings. So they really do keep our forest healthy. They scrape off all the fungus as well as bacteria off of our native trees. So they are basically our window cleaners of the forest, allowing a lot of our plants to able to photosynthesize. I know a lot of old timers that says that because of lots of our snails, they see a lot of fungus and black mold on our forests now, and they don't look as healthy. And they even hypothesize that if they were actually all of the snails that were still living in on Hawaii Island, maybe they were keeping the rapid ohia rod in check. But we will never know now because a lot of our snails are now gone. So this is a video of an endemic snail that we have that we brought from Kauai. We have a live captive rearing facility here trying to understand the life history about these species, but also keeping them safe. So this is like a few second old keiki that hatched from an egg in captive rearing, and we have some ohia plants in there. So instead of going to a live leaf to eat, it went to a part of the branch that was injured that had a lot of fungus and mold growing, and it already started scraping. Yeah, so it's already cleaning and healing some of our plants.
Nori, can you give us an idea on how big that snail was?
Oh, it's about the size of a rice grain.
Thank you.
Yeah, we zoomed in with the microscope. It is a keiki, really, really teeny tiny keiki. The adult is about an inch long. So yeah, so and you can see it in the Alakai swamp in Koke'e, also Lumbalis, also Cinia lumbalis. You can see that. All right, here's another quiz. How much of the Hawaiian land snail fauna is extinct? Okay, someone said 90%. Anybody else?
75%.
75%. All right. So this is extremely important to know how much is gone. It's because a lot of times you won't give funds to something that is already extinct, right? And so when you have the perception that 90% are gone, most people won't even work on it. And there has been a misconception over the years that 90% of our fauna is gone. And that is because most of our research for 3 decades from 1970 to fairly recently only concentrated on this group, the Achatenellinae. But it only makes up 13% of our fauna, right? And so all of the other 650 species have been forgotten. And no Achatenellinae ever made it to Kauai. So when in the Mo'olelo and the Oli of Kauai, when they're talking about kahuli and pupukanioi, what snails were they talking about? Not the Oahu tree snails, right? So we need to reconnect the really place-based education and knowledge of not just the state of Hawaii, but even within an island, and within an island, even within a location, right? So that's really important, and that's the reason why I'm doing some of these presentations, so that we do not forget all of these other snails. And so when I first worked on Hawaiian land snails, because everybody recognizes the Oahu tree snails, that sometimes people would give me snails that they said that they killed in the forest because they thought it was invasive. And when they gave it to me, I'm like, that's native, and that's native, because these are how other land snails look like. So again, like I was saying, some of the knowledge gaps, right? Unless you know what it is, you can't save what you don't know about, right? So that's why it's really important that over the last decade that we really honed in on the species taxonomy and the distributions and the abundance of what we found. And so we have, and so from 2012 to 2015, we have 800 sites that we did only in 3 years. And within 3 years, we were able to rediscover about 100 species. People thought that have not been seen since the 1940s or the 1960s and just totally forgot about them. So these are all the snails that we found that people just wrote off or thought were invasive, right? And started killing them, right? Or saying that, oh, I see them everywhere, right? Not knowing that these are species specific, found in one location in the entire world. So if you're like from Oahu, we have snails on Ko'olau that you won't see in the Waianae. Use on Hawaii Island, there are things in Kohala that you'll never see in Hilo, right? So that's how specific some of these snails are. We also employ a whole bunch of techniques to figure out what they are. We do morphology, we do genetics, and we also do distribution. And so here are some species rediscoveries. This Nicombia and Laminella, there are multiple species found on Molokai, and people thought everything from these two genera were gone from Molokai. but they're still there. So these are some happy stories. A really, really happy story is Auricula armata. We've been searching for this snail on Hawaii Island for 15 years. People said that they're already extinct, that, don't waste your time. But we still were like, we already found 200 species in like a decade. We're not going to write you off until we really went to every single spot that you ever were recorded in the entire history of humans, and then we'll write you off. Last January, we found it, one population in Kohala. So we were so happy working with the NARS personnel in Kohala, and it was found. And it lays one egg at a time. And guess how long it takes for that egg to hatch? 2 months. That's the reason why they're going extinct, right? Because back in the days, there was no predators for them except for primarily birds or that caterpillar, right? There weren't any ungulates because the only mammals that are native here are the monk seal and the hoary bat, right? There are no native reptiles or amphibians except for the green sea turtle. So they didn't need to be having a life history that was fast and high reproductive rate to survive. And unfortunately, we have so many invasive things here that they haven't had time to evolve to even tackle a lot of these threats, unfortunately. And we are also describing new species, and people are saying, oh, you get to name a new species. And you can call it like snail McSnail face or some crazy thing like that. But no, we try to be a lot more respectful for a lot of these snails, try to also provide a Hawaiian name, working with the Kanaka community to find names or to pair names to be having some of these new species. But it's also important to be naming species is because you cannot provide any funds. You cannot put in any endangered species list unless it has a name. You can't just say Endotanta species 47, right? You actually have to describe it. And it takes effort to be doing it the right way. And we picked these two first is because this top part, that stick, that's a toothpick. That's how tiny that snail is. It is only found in the Waianae Mountains with only one population left, right? And so we thought this species needs to have a name because it needs to be on the conservation list. This bottom one here is the last endodonta species on Earth. All of the other species in this group, as far as we know, are extinct. And they're only from Hawaii. Guess where this snail is found? Guess which island? Anybody?
Big Island.
Nope. Go north.
Deborah
Hawaii?
and Danny suggested Kauai.
Go north. Some
Oh,
more.
oh, Nihoa.
Nihoa. Yes. So if a tsunami or more ants start to go up the mountain, these little, hill on Nihoa, or a tsunami, gone. The whole entire genus is now going to be gone. So we named this species as quickly as we can to be like, you need to save this, or it's going to be, the entire genus is gone. And so over the last 5 years, we've been working with other museums also to put all the records of 6 natural history museum of all Pacific Island records into one-stop shop, so that you can find field notebooks, images, all of these things into one place. So if you want to be studying land snails from Fiji, from Oahu, from Tahiti, you can go to this site and see where all of these species used to be found. And then we also are having all of these maps also mapped onto these areas so that we can basically have our treasure map. And by doing so, we can also update a lot of conservation assessments. Because a lot of times when you go to the IUCN Red List or trying to list something, it says data deficient. It's because we don't have the basic information. So even if you say it's the last population on Earth, it may not be guaranteed that it's going to be on any conservation list. It's because there's data deficient. You don't know the trends of decrease and all of these other things. So we've been trying over the years, trying to get all of the historical records, all the current records to be like telling the state as well as the feds, these are how many that are left of this one species, right? So it's been taking a lot of work, a lot of crucial work, a lot of fun work, but a lot of also disappointing work. So I was telling you about Auricula armata that we just recently discovered. Well, we just found out from the NARS guys, they told us that it was so rainy that the landslide just took out the Olana area and the ginger. Luckily, we pulled some out and they're alive in captive rearing. And also, luckily, they did additional surveys and there was one drainage over that they found another population. But if we didn't, extinction is happening very quickly right now in our lifetime, within months. So things that we can rediscover in 1 second can be gone in a blink of an eye in the next. So here we have a map of the islands, and in black are all of the species ever described from each of these islands. And the number in purple are the things that we have been able to put back as extant on each of these islands. And it's still a work in progress. Here are some pictures I wanted to show you of Hawaiʻi snails. So if you want to know about Hawaiʻi snails, these are what they look like. And so we are still trying to work in trying to add more to the list. Here we have the list of extinctions. So here are the 13 families here. In white, we have the number of species described from each of the different families. And in red is the percent extinct for each of these families. So some of these families have now been extirpated from these islands. And if we no longer have the Amastridae, it's going to be extirpated from Earth. The Amastridae is the last endemic animal family left in Hawaii. All endemic families of animals in Hawaii are now extinct. This is the last of it. Out of 325, we have 22 species left. None of them are on the Endangered Species Act. And most people don't even know about them, even in Hawaii. And so we have unfortunate news that even though we have about 300 species that we know of that are still alive, that unless we do something drastic, we are going to lose about 100 next decade. And these are some of the ones that we're going to lose, including this one here on the lower right, the second to the right, this brown conical one. It was rediscovered by Emery that worked for NTPG about a decade ago. We thought all Leptacatine, all amatras were extinct from Kauai. And he rediscovered this up at Upper Limahuli. So you guys still have an amatra left on Kauai that is still alive. And so, yes, I kind of tackled the first 4 green bullets here. And so I'm going to talk a little bit now about the biotic factors that we're trying to be doing. So we have a captive rearing facility here. And if you want to know a little bit more about the program, here's a QR code. We are keeping a lot of snails in these boxes, trying to put in fungus and as well as other plants, because we don't really know all the things that all of these species eat. So we're trying to gather all of these data. And we are even taking ones that are not yet threatened because we want to make sure that we can take care of them before there are only like 4 or 5 left. At that time, you don't want to experiment on anything. And a lot of times when they do have keiki, we try to put them back in the forest reserves or these protected snail enclosures that try to keep all the predators out. And we work very closely with the state. So the state also have a snail captive rearing program. And here are some of the snails that we have in both or one of our captive rearing programs. So this is the Combia comengai, endemic to Maui. And here we have Laminella sanguinea, endemic to the Waianae Mountains of Oahu. It is all wild populations are extinct, so they only live in captivity. This is an Acatenella found in the Ko'olau. This is Auriculella maleata, also endemic to Oahu. This is an undescribed Succinia that we have yet to describe. This is another amastrid that is extinct in the wild. And this is Kaala subretila. So you see all the beautiful gold specks on this snail? It comes from the body. So once the snail goes extinct, you will never have these golden speckles left in your forest. So we have currently we have an NSF project that is, unless the current administration nix it. But we're just continuing to work. Oh wait, I need to go back. There we go. All right. So we are trying to figure out what plants are now needed for a lot of these snails to survive, right? Because we're just restoring the forest of sometimes what we think we know what is used to be there, or what is easier to propagate or other things like that. But there's no studies that says these are the plants that you need to put back in the forest so that we can reintroduce, translocate, or have snails survive. So we're trying to figure out what they are. So we've done plant preference surveys on multiple islands, and we want to do one on Kauai. So we're working with, hopefully with NTPG this year or next year to be doing surveys up somewhere on Kauai so that we can figure out what the Kauai snails, what plants they are preferring or not preferring to be living on and scraping off fungus and plants. And the interesting thing is it doesn't matter if you're on Maui and Kohala or in Ka'ala, the snails, didn't matter which ones they were, had a specific preference. So if you had Carnival, the Clermontia, Ilex, and a couple of other ones like Olana and Hame, those are almost guaranteed that you would find a snail in that forest. It was interesting that they didn't prefer ohia. And it's not that it's not important. So it's probably really important for the structure of the forest, but all of these understory canopy plants are what is needed for the snails to live. So this just things to keep in mind, that it's good to be putting out all of this ohia, but hey, we need some Rosacea, some ilex, a lot of these understory plants that sometimes we forget about, but are crucial for the survival of these snails. And so the very last part is the Australian knowledge gap. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing these workshops, is that unless the community knows about these snails, you guys are not going to do anything about it, right? And so we've been pairing with a lot of artists trying to make products so that people know more about the snails on the different islands. We've been having these beautiful artists making murals alongside the H1 on Oahu. So if you're like stuck in H1 trying to go to the airport, hopefully when you pass the ship museum, you'll see some of these snails on the right side as you go to the airport. We have been working with the state to also to educate the legislators, the senators, our congressmen to know about our snails too. And so the governor actually wrote the year of the Kahuli on 2023. We have interns that are making trading card games. And so this is all based on our research. So we have snail profiles that provide the rarity, which is their conservation status. On the upper right, we have their habitat. If they're in the marine system, they are on the ground, if they are on trees. And then, of course, we have invasive species profiles too. And the more invasive they are, they have much higher punishment when you actually play the game. So if you have the giant African snail and you flip it, it wipes out all your resources. And that's what it does in real life too. So we had to call HR a couple of times because some of these students are really cutthroat. No, but they're all good. But yeah, so here's a QR code. So we do ask for donations. So if it's like $60, you have the whole pack, and you can scale it down to a pack of 10 or a pack of 5. And all of these donations go straight to our Hawaiian land sale conservation funds. And they also made stickers, because one of the best way to get people to appreciate is to hook them, to be like, oh my God, they're so cute, or they're so pretty. So we're trying to make that hook and change people's perceptions. And the next generation really have the power. So we had a high schooler draft a bill for the state snails. And then we had elementary school kids that actually wrote so many of these testimonies. And then we went to the state. And last year, the governor designated 9 state snails, 1 to represent each of the different islands. And we're also trying to be teaching teachers to be teaching their keiki about our snails. So we have a really intensive 7-week research internship program for teachers across the state. And we help them create curriculum that they can put into the classrooms, and then hopefully write the lesson plans that the DOE approves of so that other teachers can be using it too. And so I just want to end this talk that, unless someone like you cares an awful lot, nothing is going to get better. And in the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. And here are 2 of my keiki. One is 3 and one is 9. And they still love going into the forest. They still love getting wet. They still like to crash through spider webs. And they are a little bit savage because they go in fully clothed and they come out half naked. Uh, and I usually have to hose them down when I go home, but it's all good, right? That they appreciate the forest, that they're not blasting music while they're hiking, that they actually listen to the lapa leaves as it goes through the wind or when the rain comes through, or by chance we see or hear an amakihi, right? So, yep, so we have a lot of institutions that have helped us over the years. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Nori. Everybody, if you would, do a reaction button to show our gratitude.
Or not. It's okay if you do sad emojis. I know how that feels. So.
Oh, right. But we are grateful to you for being here and sharing your mana'o with us. And we do have a couple questions.
Mhm.
One that is in the chat, which is, what are the major native predators of land snails?
Mm. So in one of the slides, I had like a picture of the po'ouli. So we know that forest birds did eat snails, right? And probably the ones that were on ground back in the days were the rails that used to be in Hawaii. So those were the primary major predators.
So
Unfortunately, yeah.
our wetland birds then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of them before because I'd heard of the po'ouli, which of course is now considered extinct.
Mm-hmm.
Correct, a forest bird that was endemic to Maui, as far as
Mm-hmm.
I know. But I had not thought about our wetland birds.
Yeah.
So that also, and then maybe I hadn't thought about that because I don't think about our native land snails as being found at lower elevations, say in our backyards of the homes and places where we live now, but they were once found there. Is that
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Yeah, they were once found in sea level in all of the bushy grasses. There are snails right in Nihoa. There aren't a lot of trees and there's not a lot of elevation, but if you just go into the Aragasa grass, you can see several species of native snails only found on Nihoa. So yeah, they're found in sea level all the way up to the snow line of Mauna Kea. So there are about 4 species that you can still see on Mauna Kea. And they're all on the rock rubbles because, there is not much trees up on that
Right.
mountain that high.
Are there
And then
any that might still be extant at these lower elevations?
probably not. We've been trying to look because part of our projects are also invasive species. So we are still going to the lowlands up to the higher points to look at where all the invasive species are. There are some that are still able to hunker down in invasive grasses now that once used to inhabit the native grasses in these lowlands. And most of them are really tiny ones that
Mm,
have that are able to survive all of the dryness, right, and the hotness. But with even climate change, it's getting hotter and hotter and drier and drier. So we even see in some of our native forest populations that we go back to, they're declining or they're disappearing. And we know it's because there's not enough rainwater and forests to keep them alive.
right. Right. That I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to clarify the question you asked about what percent of extinction, and I think you had 90, 75, and 60%.
Hmm.
Um,
So
I know
the
nine,
answer is 60%.
I'm
So
sorry.
about 60%. So 60% are gone. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So because we have about 300 out of the 759 that we know about are still
Okay.
around.
Just wanted
Yeah.
to clarify that. Thank
Hmm.
you very much.
Yeah.
And we have a question. Why are they generally so small?
Um, Land snails in general are small compared to freshwater as well as the marine system. It's because they need calcium to be building their shells. And in a lot of these Pacific Islands, we just don't have a lot of nutrients, period, right? We used to have a lot of nutrients from seabird poop, but we have, a deficiency in nitrogen and calcium and all of these other really important nutrients that build up an animal, right? And so for Pacific Island lance because there isn't a lot of calcium on land, they have to be tinier and their shells has to be thinner. than ones that you see in the continents, where they can scrape limestone, right? Because we don't have limestone in Hawaii, but they
Mm,
are in the continents, right? And so a lot of these snails are able to be more robust in their shells and get larger. And then also a lot of these snails have still kept their ancestral state. So in a lot of island biogeography, there are things that start to grow large, right? Because they no longer have predators. So we have the Acatenella as well as the Carelia that are about 3 inches. Like the Carelia, the largest one was about 3 inches long, right? It was because they were able to, their ancestors that got here were super tiny. Because the way to get to Hawaii are like the three W's, right? Wind, water, and wings. If you're small enough, you can probably come through the hurricane, but most likely you raft it, right? Because remember, there's a tsunami in Japan a couple of years ago, and a couple of months later, you have this big rafting debris coming from Japan that docked itself on these Hawaiian islands, right? And you only need one or two colonizers to be able to make babies and then radiate throughout the islands. But most likely are probably the seabirds. We
right.
used to have seabirds from the coast to the Kauai caves up in the mountains, up in Lanai Hale. We had the petrels. You even still see the tropical birds in Kilauea caldera, which is really high up, right? So imagine that an albatross that migrates here, or even the kolea,
Mhm.
right? That flies here every single year. You just need a one little snail that is pregnant that just plops off by the time it goes to Hawaii. And Hawaii has pretty much every single habitat in the world. We have Arctic tundra in Mauna Kea to desert coastlands on Molokai and Kauai, and everything in between. Right?
Right.
So unfortunately, as invasive species come here, they can also find a home in these islands anywhere.
Uh, I think Spencer's asking this question. Are there resources to help identify snails and or species of interest? Can you point us to any?
Yeah, let's see if I can pull it up. So, one of the unfortunate things about this research here, let's see if I can. Um,
And Mike, I saw your
find
hand
it.
up. I'll get to you next.
If I can pull up, there we go.
Is this
I have to put a
your field guide?
website. Yeah, my field guides.
Yeah.
Um,
She has great field guides by island, right?
well, we have the state snails by island, and then we have the 13 families.
Yeah.
But again, it's hard to make a comprehensive field guide right now. It's because unfortunately, there are about a half a century where there wasn't any work on Hawaiian land snails. And then when there was work on Hawaiian land snails, it only worked on one small group. So just imagine if I told you that we are only going to work on forest birds, but we're going to ignore all seabirds, all
Right.
shorebirds, all wetlands, ignore the eel, ignore the pueo, ignore the alala. You guys are going to tell me I'm crazy, right? And like plant wise, only do the ferns. Ignore all the flowering plants. Ignore all of that. You guys would tell me I'm crazy, right? Well, unfortunately, that's what we did with Hawaiian land snail research. Most of it was only on one small group. And so most of the people that are experts in these snails are dead.
Mm. Well,
So
you're not, thank goodness.
working from scratch, right? Because fortunately, the people that worked on land snails had these amazing field notes. They had all of these drawings and things, but we've been needing to take time to photograph them and image them. But before we can do that, we have to figure out what they are.
Yeah.
So we're slowly working on it. It's easier to make invasive snail guides because there's less of them, but we have 80 invasive snail species in Hawaii. 80, and it's increasing. So that's a whole different talk for some other day.
Yeah.
But yeah, but if you go to this site, there are a couple of field guides that we're able to put together in between doing all of these other research and other things. So, but hey, if you want free work and you want to help us make guides and come here and digitize and put it all together, we need people power to be doing that. But yeah, other than that, it's hard. Yeah.
It is. Are you going to put the link then in the chat?
Yep. Oh,
Okay.
I did. Oops, I thought I did. Oh, no, it was a direct message to Sherry. don't want to do that. Sorry, Sherry. Okay. Everyone in meeting. Aha, there. There you go.
There it is. There we go. Excellent. And I want to give Mike an opportunity to ask a question, and then I'm going to go back to the chat. It looks like there's a couple more.
Sure.
Have at it, Mike.
So, a few years ago, I did some snail surveys out on Lake San, also known as Kamole.
Yes.
And while we were there, the pure excitement that we got when we actually found these little tiny snails on the Erevar was, one of the coolest things that I had experienced while I was out there. However, immediately after, I went to Palmyra Atoll for the rainforest realignment team,
Uh-huh.
cutting down the coconut trees, and I found so many snails on these coconut trees, right? On the fronds. And I remember asking my supervisor, on Lake San, it was such a big deal when we found it.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden I'm cutting down all these coconut trees and there's on the backside of the fronds, if you flip it over, 10,
Mm-hmm.
15, 20.
Oh,
And
I want to know
I
what
was,
they are.
I was
Did they
at,
collect?
well, I initially asked like, what species are these endangered? Like what do we know about them? And essentially the gist of what I remember, this was a few years ago, was not to worry about it, And this has been 3 years ago, and this whole time I've been thinking, I wonder what Nori would have to say about that. Or I'm just curious as what we know about the snails on Palmyra.
We
Or
don't, right? So that's the reason why I ended with this. We will only care what we know about, right? So if they don't care about it because they think, or there's small things that are just there, we don't know how unique they are to that island, or if they're invasive in the
Yeah.
first place, right?
And then
So
on
that's
Palmyra, there's a series of 27 islands, So it could have been, and we're cutting
because it's
down,
been
the
a
project is cutting down all
comprehensive,
the coconut
yeah,
trees
and
all
there
over the
haven't been a
palm.
comprehensive survey on Palmyra since like the 1930s or 40s of snails.
And we're actively cutting
And
down. And the site
I
that I was
know.
at was a regrowth site they had cut it down 3 years prior to us going to it. So I bet you well, there's a lot of but then that directly coincide with the work that they're doing to remove all the palm trees. So I just remember, it's funny that this all came up now. I guess not funny, but the whole time that I'm cutting
Yeah.
these palm trees down, which was a significant amount, I thought, what would
Mhm.
Dory have to say about this? So
What are they, right? So, I even teach like all the kids, it's like to know where things come from, sustainability. You need to know where they are, whether it comes from the ABC store or Walmart. It's like you need to know where things are, right? So that you know the importance of it, no matter how small. And so what you guys found up in Laysan, so the last group that went there just brought me back some snails, and one of it I think is Pacificella baldwini, endemic to the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, that haven't been seen since the 1930s.
Oh my gosh, that's so
Right?
awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and they're nowhere else in the world. And
Okay.
and and
And this
something that is,
and this is a good plug for the young people or the people in this session who have young children. Like these are careers for our young people. Let's get some more people working in these and identifying, right? And let's get Nori to Palmyra too. I'm going to jump to another question because there are a couple more, and I know we're running really tight, if not over on time. Um,
sorry.
no, this is great. Have you found any snails on Mauna Loa? Because there's lots of fungus there.
Yeah, so we have found, and there's a lot of spots we still haven't been to. There's so many spots. It's like crazy amount of spots. But yeah, so we have found I can't tell you off the top of my head all of those species right now. But yeah, we have found them. And then I also want to put in one more thing about extinction, right? Particularly within our Hawaiian community, that when a species goes extinct, it is a biological extinction. However, in the culture, like in Hawaii, it's not just a biological extinction, it's a cultural extinction, right? So, because in Hawaiian, a lot of the language is verbally. There aren't sketches, there aren't drawings, and a lot of times there aren't any photographs. And even in the new pepa, right? So when they're talking about kahuli on Kauai or kahuli on Lanai or in the mo'olelo, right, or in haupu, right, what were they talking about? And so when you have an extinction, the Hawaiians will lose that physical connection. You can't no longer go into the forest and be like, this is hini hini ula that my kupuna talked about, because they're gone. Unless you come to the museum and be like, Here's a shell, right? But you will no longer have the redness of the ula if it comes from the body. So it's really important that, yeah, that even though we think that they're small and brown and may not be important, may have been important for Kanaka. They have so many names for the winds and the rains and all the development of Ohia. They would not have ignored the smallest of these snails. They would probably have put them in stories and song or have recognized them. And so people said, oh, well, our snails no longer sing. Well, maybe because we don't listen to them anymore, right? And so it's really important that when we talk about species conservation in Hawaii, that is not just a biological thing. It is a cultural connection also that we're going to lose.
Thank you for that. So true. I'm glad you added that. Julie made the comment that she wants a Hawaiian Islands snail t-shirt or print. Is anything like that available?
Yeah, so we do have a couple of shirts that if you come to Oahu, you come to the Kahuli Fest or you come to HCC, the Hawaii Conservation Conference. We have some shirts. So we have a 3x3 print that we made of snail teeth, right? And we have the olelo that said, life is in the mouth and death is in the mouth. Because if you have invasive snail teeth, they eat up all of our plants on the lo'i and they eat up everything in our forest. But our native snail teeth keeps our forest healthy. So we have one of those shirts. We also have some Bishop Museum shirts that has a Hawaiian land snail logo and things like that. And so they all are under donation, so that we can send to you, or you can come to some of our festivals to donate, and then you can get one of our shirts. And they're dry fit, so you can go hiking in it.
And so just check the bishopmuseum.org website, right?
No, it's not really on that. You can probably email me. Here, I can put my
Okay. While you do that, I've just got a couple more questions and then we're going to let
yeah,
you go because you've given us more time than I asked for. Thank you very much.
all good.
Cougar, I'm going to invite you to unmute yourself and ask your question because I think that you will be able to verbalize it better than I can read it, quite frankly.
Okay, yeah, of course. Thank you very much for your time and the opportunity to speak. I was really hoping to ask you about shifting baselines. And
Mhm.
I guess after many years without surveying and being to these ecosystems, how you went about doing these surveys and connecting with maybe what these ecosystems look like and snail biodiversity was like, even if the ecosystem has shifted significantly. Like these ecosystems have been seeing so much disturbance, introduction of invasive species. How can we like set up baselines effectively and how can that aid in restoration efforts?
Yeah, that's a tough question considering there's so much land change, right? And so I'm usually wary of models that use existing habitat for our plants and animals to indicate areas that we should translocate them, right? Because it just could be that they're in a crappy habitat right now, but that's all that's left, and that's all the population that you find for the snails. So just because you're in that crappy habitat does not mean you should be translocated to that crappy habitat. But it's hard, right? Like you said, when there's been so much information lost. So that's the reason why this plant preference study we have is so crucial. Is because if we know what plants are important for the survival of a diversity of snails, like the carnival, that we do have historical information of where carnival was located back in the days, right? And then we can overlay current snail distribution of the collection right now with these information of these plant species to figure out one, where they can be, two, where we can translocate them to be, and three, if we know there's carnival and ilex, what other information that we know historically that has these combination of understory plants to then rebuild our ecosystem. So it's a lot of treasure hunting. It's a lot of pieces that we need to put together, right? And so we take things from the mo'olelo too, right? So there are some information that, the kahuli was singing in this love story and there was akulea fern, right? Well, let's map where all the Akalea fern are, and are there any, especially on Mauna Kea, where the Oli was from, right? Is there Akalea fern? Can we go to that area? Are there snails left? Right, that kind of a thing. So
Amazing. Thank you so much.
yeah, that's a lot of work. If you want to join the team, we'll take you.
Let's go. Thank you.
Two more, I think, quick questions for you, Nori. Can and do snails scrape calcium from other species' eggshells?
Yeah, so we do know that sometimes there are snails on top of each other's shell, and you can see them scraping. You're like, ooh. So they do, right? They do scrape off shells from each other, given the chance.
Off of each other? What about off of eggshells, say like a bird egg?
I don't know about the eggshells that they've scraped off of that.
Okay.
No clue. Yep.
And then Mike was requesting that you put the name of that endemic snail to the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. That was,
Oh, okay.
if you put that in the chat.
Oh,
Um,
I need to make sure I have the right combination. Pacific,
and I'm gonna close off the questions there unless somebody just has one that is absolutely burning and they cannot live another moment without having it answered.
And then the other species that you guys found was by
Did I miss a question?
brain fart. No. I'm writing down the species. Tornadilides. I can't remember the species. Oh, Brian I. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Oops.
Okay, Julie did
I
ask.
also did. No,
Oh,
I didn't do it for everybody. Sorry. I don't know why it's just going direct messages. Okay, let me do it for everyone.
It doesn't switch it back if somebody has direct messaged you.
Yeah.
Okay, Julie's squeaking in. One last question.
There we go. Okay.
We hate not to have them answered. Is it true that each Hawaiian valley has a different species of snail?
Can.
Okay, can.
Yes.
All right. So with that, I want to say thank you everybody for joining us today. And of course, a huge barrels and giants of gratitude to Nori for sharing and, just really for finding where in our ecosystem, what species, what families of animal needed support and devoting your career to this because clearly there was a void and it needed filling. And we're just so grateful that you are doing it because how amazing are these snails, right? So,
well, I had great mentors. So Sheila Conant was my PhD advisor,
yeah.
and Betsy Gagne was also my my mentor. And if you knew them, they were Hawaii's natural historians. So they always told, and I was a seabird biologist actually before I turned to malacology. I worked on the white tern, the monoku, but they always told me, you can't just save a seabird if you can't save everything else. So know about the insects, know about this, know about that. I'm like, oh my God, it's so much work. But I was like, yeah, you kind of have to. Ecosystem.
We're so grateful so grateful for you doing it. And that is kind of why I wanted to start these forest talk events so that we can all learn so much more about, even the overlooked flora and the fauna that need our voices, really, that need us to step up at this time now more than ever, because they are so special. So thank you all for being here. Thank you again, Nori. When you guys click out, when you leave our webinar for today, there will be a questionnaire that pops up, hopefully, in your tab. I would love for you guys to answer it. I think there's just 4 or 5 very short questions. It's good feedback for us so that we know what kind of programming to continue to do and whether this is worthwhile or not. So please take 30 seconds to do that if you will. And next week, Wednesday, we're going to be in the forest doing some forest journaling. If you're interested in that, I dropped links in to sign up. I'd love to see you there. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thank you so much, Nori.
Thank you.